Hey, my name is Anthony Romano, and I'm going to tell you in this video how to improve your willpower instantly through dieting choices. Now, this video is the culmination of 3 books I was reading recently, which are Willpower by Roy Baumeister, Peak by Dr. Marc Bubbs, and the Biohackers handbook, which is an encyclopedia of just scientific mechanisms, which was basically a Christmas gift to myself from myself. So basically, this video is going to give you the culmination of the most important sections of those books, at least from my interpretation, within a few minutes. So use the willpower to watch this entire video. If you can't do that, then there's no hope for you. But the flip side is, if you can watch this entire thing, you're going to know everything you need to know about manipulating your willpower through food choices and things that don't require willpower. So, like I said, I recently began reading a couple books on willpower. And this isn't because I felt a particular deficit of willpower or anything. I'm very confident in my own levels of willpower. They're more than adequate, and I'm happy with that. And I've made other videos generally talking about these topics, especially the correlation with blood sugar. Okay? Now, this is going to be the main key for this video. The main key for this video, right, the main takeaway from a lot of these books, and you can write this down, is your blood sugar equals willpower, okay? So let's break that down. Your blood sugar is in a direct relationship with your willpower at any given moment. And one of the first books I read on this, and because I read a lot of books at a lot of different moments, and I use some audiobooks, some physical copies. And by the way, get an audiobook service for sure, or listen to my videos while you're doing miscellaneous tasks, okay? Because this is the best way to make use of your time, especially if you put me on double the speed, but sometimes I'll probably talk too fast if you do that. So, use the willpower to listen to these things while you're doing other miscellaneous tasks. And when I'm talking about blood sugar, okay? What does this mean? Does this mean just eat sugar all day and you'll have great willpower? No, that's not what it means. And I will explain. So, the first book I read on this topic was Willpower by Roy Baumeister. And this is essentially a lot of physiological ties to willpower. There are some other concepts in there, like this sort of willpower depletion, which is like essentially, the longer you've been awake and making decisions all day, obviously your body's going to want to go to sleep. But these are tied to other mechanisms like adenosine in your brain, which basically keeps you awake, and coffee binds to that, essentially blocking it. But there's other things like that that are also relevant, but the key takeaway is blood sugar. Okay, so this whole video is going to revolve around getting your blood sugar in appropriate levels. Okay, so there's a couple ways to do this. So we know that blood sugar is the foundation of this willpower as far as nutrition comes, right? So you'll often notice people who, when it comes to a fat loss diet or something, right? The people who are already overweight are the prime demographic of people who are going to be doing fat loss diets, right? I mean, everybody does them because everybody can always improve. But oftentimes the people you see relapsing are people who are already down a far road in the first place. And, of course it makes sense. Oh, well, those people were eating a lot in the first place. But they're used to that standard, and it's hard to drop down because of literally the physiological mechanism of blood sugar and insulin, which is crashing when it's below levels that they're not used to. So I'm going to bring up this other book to kind of explain a little diagram here. So I recently picked up this. This is the Biohackers handbook, okay? And if you follow my Instagram, you'll know that I posted about this because I'm very excited about this book, okay? And this book means a lot of other great topic ideas for me to make videos on. You can see how freaking huge this thing is, okay? But it's like 500 pages from a couple doctors in Finland and technology experts. And these guys are great. I have a lot of trust in them, but let me pull open to the page I had here. So this is something I allude to in many of my videos, okay? This right here, this diagram of blood sugar, okay? So oftentimes you'll hear me explain that with blood sugar, if you're eating high glycemic carbs, okay, so carbs that spike your blood sugar, you're going to experience this rise, and then if you're good at handling carbs, you'll stabilize blood sugar. But even then, it'll still drop, okay? The people who have the best ability to restore to baseline are people who are following a ketogenic diet or a fasting routine. More on that in a moment. But here's the general timeline of what carbohydrates will do and sugar when you eat them. You got a blood sugar rise, and then you have eventually it's going to stabilize and drop. And then at this point right here is where willpower is at its bottom bedrock, okay? Rock bottom. And it's the most depleted, and you're the most susceptible to temptation, all these other things. And on this page too, we have a bunch of other things that will regulate your blood sugar besides simply food choices, like thyroid hormones and adrenaline. But I'm going to get to that in a moment. So stay with me. But when we're talking about that blood sugar curve, okay, that graph, the thing is, when we're talking about managing your food choices, there's two categories you could fall under. You're somebody who's doing a carb diet or a ketogenic metabolism. You're either on a keto metabolism or carb metabolism. You're one of the two right now, whether you like it or not. And if you stop eating long enough, you'll go into a keto metabolism, where your blood sugar is stabilized near 24 hours of the day. But more on that later, but just know in the back of your head right now that the best way to stabilize blood sugar and insulin and keep it the least volatile is the ketogenic diet, okay? And you might have even seen, actually no, it's a very low viewed video on my page, but I made a video talking about my favorite productivity hack, which is diving deep into ketosis. And you can watch that video here. I'll probably throw it because you have to watch that video. It ties in greatly with this one. I talk about some of my own experiences with this as well and how I manage doing a lot of the things I do using a ketogenic diet as my primary productivity hack. Now, back to the topic of this video. So you're on a keto metabolism or you're on a carb metabolism. You don't have to do the keto stuff, okay? My videos, I love talking about keto, and it's fantastic, and I have a lot of confidence that you'll enjoy it if you haven't already tried it. But you have to give it a chance. You can't gray zone it. And if you're not interested in that, don't worry. There's still plenty of content in this video for you, because when we're talking about carb dieting individuals, there's a couple things you're going to want to watch out for. There's two paths you can take. You can take a very precise path or an imprecise path, right? Because you don't want to be using all your willpower in an attempt to create more willpower, right? It's kind of a, oxymoron, all right? So you have an imprecise path and a precise path. What is the imprecise path? Well, you go to the glycemic index. You Google glycemic index. This is going to show you how long of a blood sugar spike and how volatile that spike is going to last in your body. So you're going to go to glycemic index and you're going to get a general idea of how glycemically dense each food is. I'll explain this in a moment, because an easy way to remember this stuff is when you look at the natural fiber content and sugar content of a food. So example, leafy greens, very high fiber, the blood sugar response is going to be slowed because of that fiber. Consuming fattier carb sources are going to slow the digestion and the blood sugar spike and blood insulin spike that would have been produced from the carbohydrate that you just ate. So that's the generalized way. And you can always keep in the back of your head, oh, okay, pasta's less glycemically heavy, okay? That will last me a longer blood sugar rise, right? That won't crash as heavily, but you will still crash, right? But if you compare that to, a bowl of cereal in the morning, especially like the very highly processed bowls of cereal, you're going to go up and then you're going to crash. And then you're going to be driving home from lunch. You're going to be looking at McDonald's and you're going to start salivating. You're going to have less willpower to resist that salivation. You know what I'm saying? You're not going to be able to get on with your day, okay? And you're going to be losing productivity because of this. So the generalized tip, before I get into finer ways of tweaking it and refining it, is look up the glycemic index and familiarize yourself with which foods are going to cause the biggest, most volatile rise in blood sugar. The higher the food is on the glycemic index, essentially, the more you're going to get a spike and a crash, okay? And you don't want that. At the very least, you'd want, some steady, like, refueling as something crashes, you snack on something, right? So essentially, you're refueling every 3 to 4 hours is what the Willpower book recommends. But you're going to want to pick slower digesting carbs. So this is one way to go, but you have to be careful with this because, you you don't want to be fully dependent on carbs. Part of the reason I recommend ketogenic dieting, even if you don't want to do it for a long time, which you don't have to, is because it resets your tolerance to these carbs, and you will gain a sensitivity to them, which will dramatically influence your body's ability to use them, which is why in the book Peak by Dr. Marc Bubbs, we have some studies that indicate people who are, well, actually a lot that indicate people who are on a ketogenic metabolism can take in carbs and within 2 hours be back to normal baseline blood sugar without it dropping to a significantly low hypoglycemic area. So, again, keto is the cheat code for all of this. But when we're talking about managing this, the imprecise way is glycemic index, and use that. Now, the more precise way is to go to your pharmacy and pick up a blood glucometer. This is what diabetics will use to measure their blood glucose from their fingers. And they literally have to prick their finger, so that's the trade-off for this one. And you'll have to get a sense of when your blood sugar is rising and what your levels of willpower feel like at a certain time. Now, this will require continuous re-administration of you pricking your thumb, okay? But there are other tools nowadays that you can get, continuous blood glucose monitors, which you attach to your arm, and it'll be there for up to 2 weeks. And essentially, that will monitor your blood sugar all day long. All you do is you literally just hold this little device to it, and you're good. I've never used one of these things. I have a very good natural sense of my blood sugar from 7 to 8 years of keto dieting and bodybuilding. But essentially, that's the more precise way to self-quantify things and to get this continuous blood glucose monitor, and also use the glycemic index in tandem with this. Now, some practical tips for managing this is other things will influence your blood sugar, especially if you're on a carb metabolism. Stress, so cortisol. Cortisol signals the release and the breakdown of tissues into immediate fuel. It's the stress hormone. It's the fight or flight. Cortisol wants to break things down so you have immediate fuel. And if you have a very significant rise in cortisol and stress in a moment-to-moment basis, it's called a glucocorticoid for a reason, because it can immediately break things down and turn them into glucose, right? Which is why people who are very, very famished and have ate very low calories might lose muscle more when they're towards the latter stages of their diet, because their body is more stressed out and there's less fuel available that it has to break down muscle tissue. Again, I know I'm a big advocate for keto, but keto has strategic ways of avoiding this due to low insulin, which basically prevents cortisol from breaking down muscle tissue, because cortisol will only break down muscle tissue in the presence of insulin, and if you're not eating carbs, you're not going to have volatile insulin. So it comes full circle with a lot of these mechanisms, and they further reinforce my, line in the sand that even though you don't have to do keto, it will undoubtedly bring you better results once you put up with getting adapted to it, because that's essentially the main barrier for people. But back to continuous blood glucose monitoring. This is essentially the most precise way, and if you have the means to pick up one of these things and purchase it online from wherever you're supposed to get them, because I've never really bought one, from that point on, you might not even need to go to the full low-carb keto realm, because essentially, if you get an idea of what your blood glucose is like at all times of the day and in all types of scenarios, you'll have a very good indication of what your willpower is like at each moment and each level of blood sugar, okay? So, those are the two main ways for carb-adapted individuals. Now, fasting and intermittent fasting are very beneficial keys, because I'm talking about blood glucose as if it's a sort of stable, fixed rate of how it's going to go up and down for everybody. But in reality, we all have different sensitivities to glucose, and a very athletic person will use glucose more efficiently and will crash less intensely compared to somebody who is overweight or less insulin sensitive. Somebody who's more insulin resistant is the term, which refers to how sensitive and how effectively your body uses insulin and carbohydrate fuel, basically. So this is often also why you see people who are insulin resistant, like type 2 diabetics, for example. They have a very hard time at the end of the day with willpower activities, even resisting cravings, and this is human nature. It would happen to any of us if we had this level of insulin and the inability to use it as effectively. So that's essentially how it works in everybody. These are the mechanisms for carb-adapted individuals and keto-adapted individuals. But for fasting, this is a wild card. It's a dark horse you could throw out if you're on the carb metabolism side of things. Because there's times of the year where I'm in both of these states. And my willpower is always much more regulated when I'm having a shorter eating window, okay? Because essentially, you're training your body through intermittent fasting. People will say fasting is like a muscle. You might have heard this. People will always say intermittent fasting is a muscle you can grow. It's an ability you can improve upon the more you do it. And this is true because you're literally training your body to perform in low blood glucose environments and low insulin environments. So another point from this Marc Bubbs Peak book, right, is, and this is something I've also made videos on for athletics and keto metabolism, but basically the best, highest level athletes are known to perform in even low blood glucose states, because oftentimes what the biggest pitfall for athletes or for people on a carb metabolism in any profession is that once your blood glucose drops, you receive a mental signal that, oh shit, we're out of fuel. But in reality, you might have extra carbs in your liver, you might have extra carbs in your muscles. Your body is simply taking the signal that there's less blood glucose flowing through your circulatory system as a scarcity of fuel altogether, because it's running on carbs and it isn't quite adept at using fat as the alternative fuel. But what you want to do is use fasting strategically to acquire that ability to perform at a low blood sugar environment. Oftentimes you have the blood sugar necessary stored in your body somewhere, whether it's your liver or your muscles, right? Especially if you're eating carbs regularly, you will have this fuel stored. You simply have to train your body to push past this point, because your brain is preemptively trying to stop you from doing activities because it's afraid you're going to run into a situation of scarcity. It's afraid you're going to run out of the fuel that your body's primarily using if you're on a carb metabolism. And I always say to people, if you're going to diet for any reason, for fat loss or something, either pick a lot of carbs or pick no carbs. Do not go in between, okay? So this is something I say all the time, and people often miscue my page as saying that you have to do keto all the time, which I'm a firm believer that it's a more optimal state to be in more often than not. But you can bounce in between the two all the time, and you never want to be in the middle. You want to be either in a state where you have an adequate amount of carbs, that you're satiated and you're able to run optimally, or you want to be in this keto metabolism. Because if you're in this gray area, okay, I'll tell you right now that 70 grams of carbs feels like shit, and it feels way worse than 20 grams of carbs. And why is this? Because when you drop your carbohydrates to the levels of ketogenic metabolism, your body gets the message. It says, oh, clearly we're not using carbs as the primary fuel here. Let's make the switch to fat, which is a slower burning fuel, and carbs will no longer create this volatile up and down effect on us. And they will also be used more efficiently. But when we're talking about the 70 grams of carb a day, your body is basically, what you're telling it, is to run on carbohydrates, but then you're giving it a very small amount of carbs. This is why every time you watch an If It Fits Your Macros diet or video, most of the people, as much respect as I have for them for putting up with the willpower necessary for this, because it is a muscle. You can, there are some people like David Blaine who can push through some ridiculous feats, but not everybody is capable of doing that. Navy SEALs are people who can do this, and they're trained rigorously. But the people who are on these If It Fits Your Macros diets, when they get to that 70 gram of carb a day diet, they will never stop talking about how shitty they feel. And it's because this is human nature. Your body wants a fuel system. It doesn't care what it is. It simply wants you to pick. So in nature, there would never be a scenario where you would eat just one Snickers bar and call it a day. That's not going to happen. Again, use the glycemic index to pick slower digesting carbohydrates to keep you constantly fueled, and try to refuel every 4 hours or so. But if you use intermittent fasting and grow this muscle, you'll be better able to manage performing in a low blood sugar environment. Okay, so that was pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. But let me just throw in one more thing here. Okay, so essentially there are some other factors which can influence your blood sugar at all times, okay? And a lot of people with these continuous blood glucose monitors are shocked from what I've seen, because they realize, oh, maybe it's not just about sugar that you're eating all the time. It could be from stress, from cortisol. It could be from extra T3, thyroid hormone. Having too volatile of a carb will create a larger presence of insulin, which will then plummet that blood glucose level. So there are other things in it, like adrenaline as well. But overall, the most important ones for this video revolve around your dietary choices, because nobody's ever going to be able to manage cortisol moment to moment. You're never going to be able to not be stressed by a thing that would stress you out, unless you pick up things like meditation and personal, improvement habits. But the point is, the big chunk of the picture, the 20% that will do the 80% of the work, is your blood sugar and managing it along with your blood insulin. They're basically synonymous, and managing your metabolism and your sensitivity to these things, especially because you don't want this rebound hypoglycemia effect. You don't want just Snickers bar, Snickers bar, Snickers bar. You'll feel great for 20 minutes and then you'll crash and it will not be good. So another tip too, which I hope I've mentioned at this point, is consume things with fats if you're not on a keto metabolism. Fats will slow the digestion of things and will slow a blood sugar response. You want a balanced blood sugar spike. You don't want a volatile one, as I've mentioned about 40 times in this video. But this is the key. This is all the different ways to manipulate your diet to further increase willpower. And I know a lot of people will comment in this video saying, oh, the only thing that matters is just that you eat a certain amount of calories and enough protein, whatever. Listen, those things work, but my page exists and I create these videos because things can get more sophisticated than this, okay? You can break things down more, and nobody else is doing this except for me, basically, and maybe a couple other people on the internet, like these guys, right? Like these are the books that I'm consuming on a regular basis. So follow my page right now and like this video, because this video needs to get out and I need my page to grow so I can continue offering content like this for people who want sophisticated fitness, for people who don't just want, cookie cutter copycats of everybody else saying all these things, okay? Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you had the willpower to put up with it. And even if you didn't, I hope you came back and now you're here and you will now have that willpower. So experiment with these things and let me know. That's it. Thank you for watching. You can dislike the video if you counted me saying the word at any point besides just now. Sometimes I throw that one out if I'm feeling particularly good. All right. Peace. Anthony Romano. Subscribe.